interviewed at that time, over a 20-year period, 500 of the most wealthy individuals in the world. It's interesting to note, one, there were no women in that group. Burl. Yeah, I know, but Burl wasn't there then. And number two, he only found 3 that almost had peace of mind, almost had a balanced life, if you will, using 90s language. Excuse me, by that I meant that when you have that kind of wealth, there is no peace of mind. When you've generated, because all those 500 guys generated the money themselves, that was the first generation money. Anybody that's got any peace of mind is the second, third, and fourth generation if they don't put it down with a tidy bowl man. There is no peace of mind. You're running and gunning. I have peace of mind now more because I still have things to prove to myself. I certainly don't have anything to prove to anybody else. And that's an important concept, and even more important why you asked that. Good that you asked that question, because you ought to be there to prove it to yourself, not anybody else. And as I said during the break, disassociating yourselves with people that aren't as successful as where you want to be means family a lot of times. That's not easy to do. You know, a daughter's a daughter the rest of her life, and a son's a son till he takes a wife, and all that baloney. It's not easy to do. It was easy for me to do. For 10 years, I didn't allow my children to see my relatives or anybody, because I wanted them to get to the age of reason, and then they had my value system in there. And now my kids look at our relatives, doofuses. La familia. How do you say doofus in Spanish? Anybody? Yeah, pendejo. Yeah. And my kid, in fact, I've said this before. It's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I put my oldest son and my former 23-year-old administrative assistant, Auntie Perkoff, against anybody in this room in a negotiation. Auntie Perkoff, who met me at the Abraham seminar. How many saw me at Abraham seminar? Okay. He came up to me. Now, it's interesting. He wrote Jay a letter asking, Jay, can you introduce me to a top-notch entrepreneur that I'll work for free to learn from him? Jay never answered the letter, might add. At the seminar, and you've heard me say that I already had a goal to get up and talk, and I knew I was going to talk, and I knew I was... Okay. This kid comes up to me, he's hanging on me like my shadow, he's following me around, and he said, Mr. Peña, you know, I live near you in PV, and I'll come and work for you for a year for free just to learn from you. And I said, no, and then I thought about it. I said, okay, let's have dinner. We had dinner 2 or 3 times, and then, now this is a kid that was smart. He made $80,000 in his high school senior year in his business. Now this kid was a comer before I met him. Now he's an assassin. He worked with me 11 months in 1 week. I mean, this kid could rip the heart out of anybody in this room. Anybody. I mean, this kid, I've seen him take on 55-year-old CEO of a Fortune 500 company and eat him for lunch. The kid was right. The guy was wrong. Auntie knew it, and Auntie wouldn't relent until he just beat the guy down like a hammer. Until he says, okay, I fucked up. I screwed up, kid. Excuse me. But, I mean, he lived with me practically day and night for 11 months. I mean, and now he's gone out and started his own consulting company. He's still going to school. He hasn't graduated from undergraduate school yet. And he's not going to a proper school. I mean, proper in the sense of, you know, Wall Street proper. He's going to Pepperdine, which is a good school. But, I mean, he's not going to, you know, one of the big schools. But the kid is just, he's an assassin. I mean, he's unbelievable. By the time he's 30 years old, I mean... I don't know, you know, but because he hung around me, and that's what the mentor system's all about. Now, he even took it one step. He stopped his mortgage business, which he had, and he just lived with me. And he traveled, and we went all over the place, and he sat through meetings, and what'd you think of this? What was this? What'd the guy say? And we go back and forth. No, you didn't notice this. You didn't notice. And then now, but that's what it's all about now. I mean, not many. I've had other people that have offered to work for me for nothing. And but the point is, you got to be there with somebody that's been there and done that. So important, been there and done that. Not been there and read about it. Okay, my management style and the management style of all these people I've alluded to is not theory X, theory Y, theory Z, which is the new rah-rah, and whatever theory they've come up after that. XY is, one is, you know, you treat your employees soft lights, music, and you be nice to them. The other one is to beat the crap out of them, you know, like the slave traders. You know, that's simplistically what theory X and theory Y is. But to be successful, you have to have some combination, because you got to have a carrot and a big stick, basically, and learn through experience. And just like disciplined employees, you don't learn to do it unless you do it. You sure as heck don't learn it from reading a book. I don't care if you read 7,000 books. You're not going to learn to discipline employees, and all employees need discipline from time to time, from a book. As I said earlier, structure follows strategy. The strategy you come up is how you build your company. What kind of people you need. Are you marketing? Are you financial services? Are you this? Are you that? Then you come up with a kind of individual. If you're going to go from growing internally to growing externally, you probably have to switch people, or at least key people, because it's not many people that are good enough, experienced enough, that have done both. Now, there are people in industry with Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 100 companies that have. That's why the overhead is so large in those companies, because they've got people for every situation possible. And the older the company, the more people they've got, the more ad hoc committees they've got, the more experience they've got, but it costs. It's my experience is it's easier to hire people in than to keep them on staff like that. Now, most of you manage in the first line. Now, there may only be 4 people or 6 people, or maybe 35 people. Because most entrepreneurs choke their businesses to death, and most entrepreneurs have too much control. You can't buy pencils or rubber bands without them being involved. I told a story last night or yesterday, I think, that I just saw my CEO of my manufacturing company for the first time in a year. She used to be my administrative assistant, and she's got her chance now. She's running a business for me. And, you know, she also says it's a lot different than carrying out orders that you give, Dan, than carrying out my own orders. Well, that's because she's not the right hand of the chairman of the board anymore. She's the head of the company herself. And one thing, titles do not earn you respect. And I've told a lot of people this, a lot of employees. I make you president, I make you general manager. That doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean spit. You've got to earn your own stripes. And people that are subordinate to you or lateral to you will be the first to tell you. I mean, just because the old man made you this, I've been here 15 years, you've been here 15 minutes. You've got to earn your own respect in business and in life. It's like the toughest kid on the block, you know. I mean, you've got to earn that. But most of you manage that way. Now, whereas in my judgment, the bottom right-hand corner is the way to manage. I can manage 2 or 3 people max. This, even at the top, it's better than the top. This one on the left-hand side is management. You manage 4 or 5 projects, 4 or 5 people. I manage, you know, basically 2 people. That's it. I don't get involved. I don't get involved with the micro end of the business. In 1976, when I first attended the PACE seminar with Jim Newman, I went from micro thinking to macro thinking. And from 1976 onwards is when I started making a lot of money. I used to go in on the weekends and spend Saturday and Sunday planning for the rest of the week. I'd plan 16 hours for the next 60-hour week. And I was pretty successful. By everybody's standards, I was super successful. I was one of the highest paid brokers in the country when I was with Payne Weber. But I didn't start to really have quantum success until I went from a micro, non-detail oriented. That's why it's tough for the computer nerds, engineers, accountants, lawyers, to a macro sense. I'm a global thinker. When John Kennedy said we will put on the moon in this decade, he wasn't thinking any of the details. I don't know if he could spell physics. It's extremely important. And I'm going to ask Brule after the next break to come up and spend a couple minutes talking. But when she went from a micro to a macro thinker, and less control is really more control. The less control you have over your people, the more control you have over your own life. And especially at this juncture, you know, if I can't, you know, play golf when I come to speak for somebody else, I don't go. I mean, it's not going to change my lifestyle. Now, in the life cycle of a business, everyone here that has a business is at one stage or another in this life cycle. Now, by definition, as I've already said, from the beginning, when you start with zero, you're growing geometrically, quantumly, because you're going from ground zero. But what happens is you start to get smart, and it starts to flatten out, and you become a manager. And you become a manager when you have your first employee, other than yourself. Then you have your second, third, fourth, etc., etc. Now, at the managerial level, you either stay a manager, which is the flat line. You become a leader or a professional manager, which is the line that's increasing. Or you stay an entrepreneur, which is the line rolling over. Every business in this room, every business that you know of, is in one of those three phases. Now, it's interesting to note, after 20 or 30 years of professional management and going to the proper B schools, now the IBMs of the world, etc., want to go back to that entrepreneurial spirit. They're trying to break up their companies, all these big companies, into entrepreneurial units that fend for themselves. It's taken 30, 40 years to figure out that other system, other than building fiefdoms and building a lot of bureaucracy, don't necessarily build any empires. I personally I don't consider myself a professional manager because I'm not. I'm a leader of people. I used to say leader of men, but now I say people. It's much easier to lead women, by the way. I mean, because women, their ego doesn't get involved. It's infinitely easier. I mean, the proteges that I have that are women are all assassins. I mean, leave no prisoners. They don't ask a lot of questions. Well, what if? Is this the way to do it? Is this the way to shortcut it? Etc. etc. Because quantum leaps require you take the offensive. You can't achieve exponential gains in your success from a defensive posture. You can't remain a passive stance and make a quantum jump. You cannot you cannot. You have to do it on the offensive. You have to be proactive, not reactive. Most of us in business are reactive, not proactive. I'm a lot of things. I've been called just about every name in the book, but never have I been called reactive. I always sue first. I'm always the plaintiff. Plaintiff gets to talk to the jury twice, or as they say in Texas, twice. People with PhDs. I've told you once, I've told you twice. We're not going to do it again. PhDs. Plaintiff gets to talk to the jury twice. Boy, as soon as I figured that out, I was always the plaintiff. Revenue generation versus cost control, no contest. The name of the game is always revenue. You can never experience hypergrowth and quantum leaps in business without generating more revenue. You've got to keep focused on revenue. I never saw anybody that came in to cost cut at a company start a company. I've seen them close down a few in my time. All managerial performance sins shall be always forgiven during periods of rapidly increasing revenue streams. You have banks wanting to do business with you. I mean, look, how do these companies that lose 10, 20, 100, $500 million a year that are generating $12, $15 billion of revenue always keep getting money? Did you ever think about it? Because they know, the financial institutions know, that there is some source of repayment. They'll just add more deficit and they'll lose more money. Companies that are losing $500 million a year can borrow all the money they want. The big difference between there is a big difference between playing not to lose and playing to win. This is extremely important. Most people play not to lose. If you've got a $50,000 or $5 million or $25 million company, you covet it. You sit on it like a hen or on her eggs because you're afraid of losing what you've attained. Because you've lost that passion that you had when you started the company. You lost that lust for life that you had. Because you've become satiated. If you do not expect it, you will not find the unexpected, for it is hard to find and difficult. If you don't expect high things, high performance things from yourself, if you don't have high expectations, you sure as hell won't get them. My son's expectation was to bat 1,000, get on base every time. He batted 640. Then he got real. I mean, hey, Derek, you don't have to do that. You're making it look bad for everybody. I mean, 278. He'll probably quit baseball next year. If I could somehow isolate my kids with just high performance people and get rid of all the little doofuses, I would. It'd be lonely, you're right. I mean...
No playmates.
Yeah. Failure is a resource that helps you find the edge of your capacities. The old saying in push it to the edge of the envelope, or what? Am I saying that right? Yeah. When I went to San Diego in 1971, I came down here while I was going to graduate school. I commuted, as I said, on PSA for $11, $12 down here because I still was going to graduate school in Los Angeles, and I ran a big sales division down here. I led the nation, had a 94+ close ratio. I came in and I had 240 or 260 salespeople, and I stood up on a Friday afternoon, called a sales meeting, and I stood up on the bench like this, a table, and I said, "You're all fired," because I had found out that they were skimming money, and so I fired everybody, and I kept one girl as my assistant, and I went to the Top Gun, the Naval Air Base, where they were discharging Top Gun pilots. I hired 16 of them. They were all looking for a job. And I taught them how to sell, got them real estate licenses, and for 65 days, we didn't make a sale. I made enough sales to carry the whole division by myself. On the 65th day, Bill Clarahan, I'll never forget his name if I live to be 1,000, made his first sale. He had, the aha experience, and Clarahan was probably the weakest of the 16 guys I had, and all of a sudden the other 15 started selling. We made more money. That's when I bought my first Rolls Royce. I mean, we were young guys, and nobody told them. I mean, because these pilots, the Top Gun pilots don't know that 3 or 4 G's ought to crush your skull. They don't know that. You can't tell a Top Gun pilot 5 G's is going to cave in his chest. You cannot. It is impossible. They don't believe you. You know why? Because they do it all the time. You cannot tell a pilot of that caliber that you can fly a plane till its wings fall off. You can't. It's true. Because they take them past the stress line all the time. So this is who I had for my sales force. We were like Grant taking Richmond. Young, single, San Diego, flight attendants, money, rock and roll. Life couldn't get much better. And I just, they just sell everybody. Dan says we're supposed to sell everybody. I guess we're supposed to sell everybody. And by God, we sold a lot of people. A lot of people in San Diego County own a lot of stuff that we put out. Every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. And Napoleon Hill said this about 60 years ago. too few times whenever something didn't go right for us or we missed an acquisition, I'd sit my team down and we'd talk about not necessarily what went wrong, but what we'd do different. And we try to take advantage of those few failures that we did have. And I do it today. And I sit down and what did we do wrong? How could we have made this better? And even though you hear about that a lot, very few people do it. More importantly, even if they do it, then they don't follow up. Because they make the same mistakes. Remember those avoidable mistakes I talked about earlier? They make the same avoidable mistakes again. Progress often masquerades as trouble. Well, then there ought to be a lot of progress in this room because I've heard a lot of horror stories so far. And I mean that. I've said many times, I don't like people telling me the company's running smoothly. Couldn't be better. You might as well go run out and fall in front of a bus then. I don't want to hear that. That means you're leaving a lot on the table. When I talk to Leanne Zacchelli, who runs the manufacturing operation for me, she says, boy, have we got problems this week. Good. And I never ask her why or what they are. Not interested. If I have to deal with those problems, then I don't need her, do I? Haven't got any calls here. When I gave the Castle seminar, I think the people that were there will attest to this. Valerie, my administrative assistant in Scotland, didn't come to me with one thing. And I know we had things just falling out of bed left and right. I don't want to hear that because if I've got to deal with it, then I don't have the right person there. I am only brought in currently, and in the last 10 years anyway, 10 or 12 years, the big problems. When the big acquisition that we alluded to, which was Bow Valley USA, we bought it from a Canadian company, Bow Valley, out of Calgary, it fell out of bed and the transaction disintegrated. I came out of retirement to resurrect it and blow life back into it. And that's what I'm good at. Crisis management, some people call it. I don't call it that. But if you have to do day-to-day things, I was driving around the other day in Houston with one of the most successful businessmen in Houston, and he made, I think, 70 phone calls in a day. Something's wrong with that deal. If I ever had to make 70 phone calls in a day, we have a massive change in my administration. If I ever got 70 phone calls in a day, we'd have a massive change in my administration. 3 to 10 phone calls, normally 3 to 6 is what I get a day. I better not have to talk to more than 3 to 6 people. And half of those are normally people that attend seminars. Because even though I say I answer calls, hardly anybody calls. One, because they don't want to waste my time, and two, because they feel that, and rightfully so, they should have something fairly important to talk to me about when they call me. I don't want to talk about, that your test letter didn't work. I mean, I don't care. I really don't. Call one of the marketing copyright gurus. I mean, because that's not my forte. And one of the things that's also important, and that one of my pet gripes about a lot of these seminars, is they give you advice. Not only do they give you advice that they have no expertise in, they've never thought about, but because they're there, they just feel they've got to flap their mouth. I mean, again, the things that we talk about here, I've personally done. As long as your troughs, be nice if I had that thing to draw on right now. As long as your troughs and peaks are higher than the ones before, your quantum leap program is working. God damn it.
Yeah, Debbie's making a note of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, okay. Now just pretend you could see here. I draw on the wall if I had a marker. Yeah, no, just pretend, okay. Now I'm gonna have to get better explaining this so you can visualize it. Okay, we have a piece of paper here and it's got an axis, a horizontal and vertical, and I've got troughs like this, peaks and valleys. Most of you focus on the peaks, and when you go from a peak to a valley, the distance between the peak and the valley, as opposed to focusing on from where you started the distance between where you started and the bottom of the trough. As long as the bottom of the troughs continue to be higher, I don't measure from the peaks, I measure from the troughs. Because peaks don't last. Glory is fleeting, ladies and gentlemen. Peaks don't last. And if your downside is your trough, which is the low point in your cycle, and those bottom points continue to be higher, then you're growing geometrically. Remember I said $2 million company, $50 million company, $425 million company. So this time around, you know, geometrically ought to be $1 billion or $2 billion or $5 billion or something. It's an important concept. Don't focus on where you've been and how you've fallen, because that's easy to do, and we've all fallen into that trap. Focus on where you started from. Bless you. If you're experiencing no anxiety or discomfort, the risk you're taking probably isn't worthy of you. The only risks that aren't a little scary are the ones you've outgrown. A high comfort level provides solid evidence that you're playing it safe, not growing, not really testing your limits at all, and not in the process of a quantum leap. If you don't have high anxiety, I mean, something's wrong. I recently hired a consultant to help me in my textile business. I know nothing about textile. I can barely spell it. And he was born in a jute mill. Jute is the old form of the textile business. And he's a neighbor of mine in Scotland. He's a very nice man. But he doesn't want any high anxiety, and I have a reputation of being very litigious. And I feel the courts are a cleansing process. It separates the men from the boys, and I believe in the court system. You get a fair hearing. And he said, Dan, I want to work with you on this, but I have no anxiety in my life right now, and I'm afraid that if I partner up with you, I'll have a lot of it. And I said, you're right, Michael, you will. So he had me sign a letter that I can't sue him, no matter even if he does something doofus, and which I did. I gladly signed it. It's all right. He hasn't done, but now he's even trying harder not to do anything doofus. And he's 65. He's been retired 7 or 8 years, and but that's not where I am. I mean, because if I have no anxiety, then I know that I'm not growing, or my people aren't growing, or if we're not making mistakes. And I've said this many times in the Watson book. Old man Watson, that founded IBM, was asked by a management trainee in the 20s or 30s, early 30s, I think it was the 20s, how do I get to the top of the management ladder of this corporation? And the story goes, and it's true, Mr. Watson put his arm on the man's shoulder and said, double your failure rate, young man, double your failure rate. Double your failure rate. Swing at the plate. Swing more at the plate. Double your failure rate. Now, I've never had a problem with that. Because under no circumstance, another Peñism, do I ever second guess myself or my employees. I expect my employees to make mistakes. If they're not making mistakes, they're not growing. To grow, by definition, you have to make mistakes. You cannot grow. It's impossible to grow without making mistakes. And then when they make them, you can't beat them up for it. Otherwise, they'll never make them again. You have to allow them to make the mistakes. And I sure as hell never second guess myself. Nobody's ever asked me if I made any money on Bow Valley, USA. I've never thought about, was it right to close down the Denver operation, which was their U.S. headquarters, and move them to Houston? I don't know. I never looked at the economics. I never figured it out. You know, I don't know. Don't care. Shareholders didn't care. Nobody in a shareholder meeting. When we used to have shareholders meetings, this is the truth. The most we ever had at a shareholder meeting when I was chairman and CEO, 10, 12 people. Some meetings we didn't have any. Shareholders knew, one, I probably didn't care what they had to say. Because I mean, you read any of our annual reports, it's pretty clear I wasn't too interested. When they owned as much stock as I did, and I'd listen to them, that kind of shut everybody up normally. They also felt comfortable because it was my money. Right now, you know, corporate CEOs in America today own less than 0.2% of their companies, on average, Fortune 1000. Less than 0.2. That's one of the problems, in my judgment, that we have with corporate America. They don't own any of the assets. You own the assets and you start running it like it's your business, you make a lot of different decisions. It has been said that if you will do the thing you fear, death of fear is certain. Courage is not the absence of fear and anxiety. It is proceeding in spite of those feelings. I've said this 1,000,000 times. High-performance individuals like myself get paid a lot of money because we do things that make you nauseous, that you can't do or that you have trouble doing. I do things that make you uncomfortable. I may do things that give you colitis. I do things that give you ulcers, give you indigestion. I give ulcers and indigestion. I sure as hell don't get it. High-performance people do things that make you feel uneasy, give you anxiety. That's I don't know if it's the preeminent difference, but it's a big, big difference. And that's why salespeople get paid a lot of money, because they make cold calls. I don't think about it making me uncomfortable, because it doesn't anymore. Used to. I got an F in public speaking. I mean, I got fired from my first 2 or 3 jobs. But that's a long time ago. I've developed a new aura. A quite strong presence, some people say. Stronger than most, anyway. But it's basically, I've done things that make other people uncomfortable. One of which is, 1 year I was gone from my family, 242 days. Which the only reason my daughter knows is because she hears my wife. I mean, otherwise Kellyanne, my daughter, she comes and sits on my lap. I say, "What do you want?" She says, "Money." I say, "You can't have it." She gets up. I mean, it's quite simple. I mean, she calls a spade a shovel. She doesn't screw around. No matter how easy it might be, never accept a short-term solution for a long-term problem. 2 examples, 1982 and 1983. 1982, I had cash flow problems. I was running out of money. And I found a guy that wanted to buy 50% of the company for $250,000 or $150,000. I don't remember exactly. I came that close to doing it. And what made me think about it and change my mind is that Bob Guccione, who I know because I did the first Penthouse Pet of the Year Awards and lost a bunch of money with him, he tells the story of in the 60s, he was trying to sell the idea of Penthouse. Playboy was just raging in the 60s. Hugh was running around sleeping with everybody in town, everybody in the country maybe. And he had expended all his money, he had borrowed from all his friends, and he's sleeping on a park bench in Hyde Park, this is Guccione, with newspaper over him. That's where he was sleeping. He had run out of money. And he found a guy that was willing to buy 50% of the Penthouse magazine idea for £1,000. £1,000 in those days was about $3,000 or $4,000. A pound was 3 to 4 to 1. He sold it to him. He went to a hotel, got cleaned up, bought a suit, and then he had, seller's remorse. He thought about it and said, "What a doofus thing this has been." So he went back and borrowed money from the other people he hadn't borrowed money yet, and he paid the guy back the $1,000, and he kept Penthouse. And three weeks later, he found funding. I said yesterday, and I've said always, there is some moron in the world that will fund your project. Someplace, somewhere. He may not be on this continent. He may be in Australia. He may be in South America. He may be in New Guinea. There is a doofus born that will fund your deal. And you just haven't looked hard enough. Bob Guccione finally found his. Thank you. Oh, I can thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, I came that close. And then again in 1983, I bailed myself out of that cash flow problem. In 1983, now I'm running out of cash again. So a guy from Dallas, Texas wanted to buy into the company, and again I came that close. And this time I decided not to do it because my two partners, Charlie and Mark, didn't want to be diluted. And even though I had 80, they had 20, I said, okay, if you were willing to ride it out, we'll ride it out. And we did. And, you know, the rest is history. That guy ultimately sued me for not selling him part of the company, and we fought a big deal all the way to the Supreme Court of Texas, which I won. He said we had a contract, I said we didn't. Now, that's short-term solutions to long-term problems. Virtually every business that I look at is in the process of making short-term solutions to long-term problems. I have never been involved with a business my entire business career that small to medium-sized business that doesn't make short-term solutions to long-term problems, because it's the easiest way out. And remember how I said earlier, Napoleon Hill said that's why rivers and people are crooked, because they go to the way of least resistance. It is. It's easier. Ladies and gentlemen, life's too short not to follow what you believe in. And there's a lot of people in this room that, given this data, given this information, will probably go home and rethink where they are, what they're doing, what they've been doing the last few years. That's good. It's also good that you have an opportunity to, at least once in your business career, be confronted with some of these ideas, because it's not likely that you'll be exposed to them any other way. Even CEOs of fairly large organizations have labored under this false misconception that many of you have in this room. Actually, you know, that cost cutting is better than revenue generating, that more control, I mean, that's because basically conventional wisdom is always wrong. Not always, almost always wrong. What you want to find, when you're looking for a mentor, you want to find somebody that has a dream and that has fulfilled part of that dream or all of that dream. You want to go into business with people that have dreams. You want to have business relationships with people that have high expectations. You want to have business relationships with people, or just hang around people. Somebody said here, Tom Peters told them to go buy lunch for successful people. I forget who told me that. Somebody did. And hang around with them. And you'll be surprised how these dreamers will take the time. Because first of all, very few people call. Very few people call. I had a young man in his 30s that attended a seminar in Chicago that called W. Clement Stone up and got a dinner appointment with him. Now, he's old now, you know, and he said, we're going to have to eat here because I can't make it out to a restaurant. But he saw him. I was pretty impressed. I like that. You know, I would have never thought of calling W. Clement Stone. Now, I want to spend a few moments and explain to you quickly why you why you have difficulty in generating funds for your businesses. I said that I went over this yesterday, and we're going to go over it again because it's important. We're going to assume that we have 5 investment opportunities. And we're going to assume for this example that they all have at least 30% minimum rate of return cash on cash. And we're going to assume that the risk factor is based on your experience, my experience, and the experience I mean competition, how many deals you've done, litigation, etc. Now, if you look down the middle column, potential of rate of return, 9 is the highest, and this is on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being highest. That means the highest rate of return. So a 9 would probably have a rate of return of somewhere around 100% cash on cash. And on the risk side, potential of risk of 10 would be something on the order of magnitude, probably has an 80 or 90% potential of you losing all your money. Okay. So investment number 1 is your idea. you come to somebody like me, and I do the rating when people come. You don't do the rating. I do the rating. Because when you rate them, I mean they're all 1 or 10 rates of return and 1 potential risk. And you come to me with a project that's got a potential rate of return of 9, which is, like I said, maybe 100 rate of return cash on cash in a year. A year. This is a year. This isn't in the lifetime of the project. This is a year. And it's got a potential risk of 10. That means maybe it's only got a 10 or 20% chance of making it. The next investment has got a 4 rate of return. Probably means that it's a 40 or 45% rate of return cash on cash per year, and it's got an 8 potential risk, so maybe it's got a 60 or 65% chance of making it, or 30 or 40% chance of losing all your money. Investment 3, rate of return's 5, means that the rate of return is probably in the order of magnitude of 50 or 60, and the potential risk is 2. Now, which means that you've only got a 10 or 20% chance of losing all your money. To cut to the chase, that is the kind of investment, not necessarily me, that a bank, a financial institution is going to be interested in lending against. Or a potential joint venture partner is going to be interested in putting up money. All things being equal, and not talking about risk weighting a portfolio. Me personally, I'm interested in something that's going to have 100 to 1,000%, and it's got maybe a 40% chance of losing all my money. I'm not interested if your deal makes 16% cash on cash. Keep it in your purse or in your briefcase. Don't come see someone like me. I also would submit to you that if the difference between 2 over prime and 4 over prime kills your deal is not worth doing. I've never seen interest debt service, unless we're talking about like a KKR Nabisco, where they took on 4 times more debt than they should have. See, that deal's dying not because interest rates have gone up 3 points. That deal's dying because they paid 6 times more than it was worth. And why did they pay 6 times more than it's worth? In this man's opinion, because of the $1.7 million in fees that were paid. Do you remember when the bid went from $6 billion to $9 billion to $12 billion to $15 billion to whatever the hell it ultimately got to for Nabisco? Did anybody ever think, I wonder why, I mean, how come the company got worth so much more money? It was never worth more money. They just wanted to get the deal done. I think the fees went from $600 million to $1.7 billion. That was a good incentive. Most of the deals, I mean, when you structure, see, and it all goes back to investigate before you invest. Most of you look at the wrong kind of transactions. Most of you look at the wrong kinds of businesses. If these aren't the kind of numbers that you're coming up with, then in my judgment, you're looking at the wrong kinds of things. And quite frankly, some of you are probably looking at the wrong kinds of industries.
What's hot?
Well, the 2 things that I know they're hot, one is healthcare, one is telecommunications. If you can't make money in healthcare and telecommunications, you got to let a bus run over you. I'm in neither one. Because Rick Scott, my old friend, has got healthcare in his pocket. And you know, I'm not going to change things I can't change. He's already there, $15 billion strong, and he's as smart as me, probably smarter. So I mean that precludes me, or the intelligent decision I've made is not to stay out of healthcare. And telecommunications, I have been working on various things in telecommunications. But now, and see, where you make money is where there's chaos. That's where the big money's made. Chaos. When energy went from $40 to $6 a barrel oil, there was chaos, pandemonium. And healthcare right now, with Mrs. Clinton sticking her nose in it, there's pandemonium. Telecommunications, where the, what do you call that network, the highway, superhighway? Yeah, there's pandemonium. A lot of big money is going to be made in that industry. You go where there's pandemonium. Thinking of Rick Scott, who, by the way, is the president CEO of Columbia Healthcare, who just made a $4 billion merger yesterday. When he was my lawyer, as I mentioned, in 1986, 1987, he sat at my right side doing deals, and he went out on his own, and he took his life savings, bought a little healthcare deal, and he's leveraged it up to now he's the largest healthcare manager, owner in the nation. And it's interesting, he lets all his regional managers, as I've already said, I think, make million-dollar decisions without having to come back to the home office. And he's got out 200 of them. They can make million-dollar decisions, less control, more entrepreneurial flavor. So these are the kinds of numbers that you should be looking at, in my judgment, not, 9% cash on cash. Now, we're going to go through the actual quantum leap plan. 3:30. Now, I was asked to put this to paper because I do this intuitively. I mean, I finally sat down, and this is 11 steps from idea to execution. If you're... No, it's not in that notebook, no. If your thing doesn't stand up to mustard to this, then you know how they make disclosures on cigarettes, you could be hazardous to your health. If your deal doesn't stand up to this, ladies and gentlemen, the deal could be hazardous to your health. Okay, number one, you identify an idea. Whatever it is. An acquisition, a new product, whatever the heck it is, doesn't matter. Number two, you investigate. You go out and you find out about the individual, about the company. If it's a public company, the public records, that book back there tells you how to investigate before you invest. You go through a lot of due diligence, it's called on Wall Street. Then you investigate some more. You find out criminal records, property records, tax records. Has the individuals ever been, I remember talking to a former Olympic coach, wrestling coach, and we walked through this deal, and then I finally asked him, by the way, I normally ask this first, but I was so enamored because he was an Olympic coach, has anybody been in jail on this deal? And he says, yeah, all the principals. I said, holy smoke. So needless to say, I didn't do that deal. You continue to investigate. In fact, your investigation process doesn't end until the deal is consummated. Okay, now you've made the commitment. You get obsessed, which is easy for me. You get obsessed. You walk it, you talk it, you live it, you breathe it. This is now your baby. Now, you and your other decision makers, to the extent that you have any, you make the preliminary decision. You get them involved. You share your obsession and you live it totally. And they live it totally. If you ever hear one of your managers, one of your partners, one of your colleagues badmouth the deal, you crush them like a grape right then. You continue to investigate. Use private investigators if necessary. $5,000 on a private investigator has saved me countless millions, tens of millions. Okay, now you have a decision action plan. You and again the other decision makers, you want to bring them in so they have responsibility for it too. So it's not, if it fails, it's not just your idea. You want them to have a reason to make it come to fruition, because it's everybody's idea. You further expand the obsession. You tell them how they're going to own part of it. That'll expand the obsession real quick. How they're going to own equity in it. And you walk your talk, and now this is extremely important. You never, ever, ever, ever share any doubts you have about the project with any living soul, including your spouse or significant other. Never! And I'm just going to give you one example of what I mean. We're working on an acquisition a few years ago. And my partner and vice chairman of the company came to me and he said, "How do you think it's working out, Dan?" And I said, "No, I think it's a little weak. I think our legal representation in the UK is a little weak." That's all I said. A few days later, one of the daughters of one of our middle management employees was at a ladies' health spa, sitting in the steam room. Now, I don't know, men don't wear anything in the steam room. I don't know if women wear with them in the steam, but they're all sitting around the steam room, these women. And this daughter of one of the middle managers hears the vice chairman's wife talking to the CFO's wife about how Dan, the old man, as I was called, thinks there's trouble with the so-and-so deal. That little girl, that 23-year-old little girl, left that steam bath and went home and told her daddy. By the time I got back from Australia, the company was in chaos, not the good kind of chaos, the bad kind, and the deal was falling in the toilet rapid fire. Took me a month to trace back and find out, because I interviewed the people. Who told you? Who told you? Who told you? And I finally got back to the vice chairman's wife. That is the last time I ever shared a doubt in any transaction I have ever been involved in. Remember that loose lips sink ships? Yep. Well, loose lips sinks deals. If the deal is collapsing, and I may look like Nero fiddling as Rome burns, everything's fine. Everything's Jake, as they used to say. Couldn't be better. Don't tell my wife. Ask me no questions, and I tell you no lies. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell my lawyers. Don't tell my accountants. Don't tell my advisors. When they were landing the first man on the moon, October 20-something, 1969, do you realize that if he had said that we would land a man on the moon by in the middle of the decade, they probably would have landed in the middle. He said by the end of the decade. It's funny how it was October 1969, don't you think? But as the guys were coming down, they were running out of fuel, and there was a last-minute decision. The astronaut, whoever was responsible, made the decision to land anyway, because the deal was collapsing. I forget if it was a computer malfunction or engine malfunction. I forget what happened. But something happened, and they weren't sure he could land. And then they weren't sure he could take off again.
They didn't have enough gas.
Okay, enough gas, enough petrol. Now that came back to the United States public after the fact. It's all right to share your doubts in books after the fact, but not during. Okay, so you never share your doubt. Now, number 8, you put together the other decision makers, not you. This is where you shove off the responsibility. The other decision makers put together a critical path, a timeline. Them, not you, because you want them to be responsible for it. Now, this is a detailed observation of a timeline. And it's continually measured. It's not like the business plan that you paid for and you put in your bottom drawer and you never look at it again. It's the flight plan that hopefully, unless you were flying U.S. Air, that the guy pulls out and checks every 4 or 5 minutes. Plans are continually monitored. Number 9, implementation. Again, the other decision makers, not you. They have focused follow-up at other levels, so they're subordinates to the extent that you have them. Focused follow-up, continual follow-up. Focused follow-up at the decision-maker level. That's the people that you've implemented to make the decision, help you make the decision. Number 10, execution. You're steadfastly laser beam focused. You live it. There's nothing else you're thinking about. And you lead from the front, and you never second guess yourself or others. I use this story, General Eisenhower during D-Day, and it's funny because the guys from the 8th Army are here for the reunion, so they already know this. But you know, D-Day wasn't supposed to work. You couldn't land people on Normandy. Nobody was more surprised at D-Day than President Eisenhower than General Eisenhower. But they had to do something to stop the momentum, and it worked. You know, D-Day worked. But when they were making the decision on general officers, we're not going to land initially on the beaches. And General Eisenhower took a piece of string and he pushed the middle of the string, and the string's parts fell to the side. And then he pulled the string, and the string followed very neatly. He says, we've got to lead from the front. We need general officers on the beach. In fact, that's how I believe the famous general, I'm trying to think if it was Teddy Roosevelt's son died at Omaha or Normandy. One of the presidents early in this century's son died on D-Day. I don't remember which one. You lead from the front. So, in the execution, when it goes wrong, you don't second guess your people because you've given them the responsibility and the authority, and you don't second guess yourself. You just come up with creative ways to alternate the plan, change the plan, modify it continually. And you lead from the front, and you're always there as a cheerleader. I considered myself the Vince Lombardi of management in the energy business in the 80s and early 90s. I was down there, you know, I was the highest priced cheerleader in the country. You know, I was lean to the left, lean to the right, stand up, sit down, fight, fight, fight. That was me. And then, number 11 is you re-evaluate a monitoring process and you start all over again. Not at the identification stage, but when you continue to investigate, you continue to monitor, you continue to make sure the implementation is followed up on, and now this is the 4-step action plan. And you work backwards. What's your wanted outcome? Where do you want to be? What do you want to have accomplished? Desired completion. You make the commitment. It's your pay price to action. What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to do? How much are you willing to sacrifice? Remember we talked about 15 pounds, no more Stolichnaya. By the way, last night I'm having a drink at the bar and I ordered Stoli, and the guy at the end of the bar bought me a drink and he said, I'm the Stoli's distributor here in town. Let me buy one on you, for you. I thought it was cute. You measure, and continue to measure periodically. And very importantly, you continue to modify. You change the plan as necessary and you continue to change it. Remember, a plane, a rocket ship, whatever, is failing its way 90% of the time to target. We get, I think they're still copying it in. Yeah, okay. We get these ideas. See, all of a sudden we go through our career with no ideas, and then we get an idea and we sit on it, and like we're in concrete. And even if it's not working, I can tell you about marketing my talents. 65,000 brochures went out at $3 and some cents a piece, with no address or phone number in them. That's not the biggest marketing mistake I ever made. It's just one of them. And I kept on writing my own copy and putting ads in the papers that didn't work. I just loved it. In fact, we have a brochure, I don't think we have any copies here, that was written by a professional, a PhD type English lit. It was reviewed by psychiatrists, Catholic priests, big time MBAs. There's not a dangling participle or a split infinitive in the deal. It did not sell one stinking seminar seat. Not one stinking seminar seat. I spent the better part of $500,000 on erroneous ideas that I thought were good because I like to hear of them. I like the sound of them, so what the hell. It's a good thing I started with. You know how you make a big or a small fortune in Israel, you start with you make a small fortune in Israel, you start with a big one. It's a good thing I started with a big fortune, otherwise I'd be out of this business by now. Because I didn't change, you know, and I still make these mistakes. I'll get involved in a deal that I won't change. Then somebody will remind me of this overhead. Dan, they'll fax it to me anonymously. It'll come across my fax machine and there'll be no numbers on it. What are they trying to say? And then I get the private investigators to check everybody's phone bills, see? And then I find out who sent it to me. Because everybody that works for me has their phone flagged. Okay. Peñaism. Plan for success, no backup plans, no ripcords, no fail-safes, or you will fail. As I told you earlier, you come with me with a plan A and plan B, forget it. Nice knowing you. Have a good life. I only want to see plan A, and I assure you, any financial institution, any other high-performance person that you might ever involve or potentially involved in one of your deals doesn't want to hear about if things don't go right. And doesn't want to hear about making 11% cash on cash. The more you investigate, the less you'll have to invest. I've already talked about that. Now, the important thing there at the bottom, the people problem. Getting people, selling your dream, and letting go of part of it. Don't get trapped by pride of authorship. Now, I've talked about pride of authorship, but it's important. You get paid in life for not what you do, but what you get other people to do. You get paid in life. The CEO of IBM or American Telephone and Telegraph gets $4 or $10 or $20 million a year, whatever he gets, not for what he does. What he gets his people to do. Unless you're a rock star or a sports celebrity, you get paid for what you get people to do. So selling your dream is extremely important. Selling that obsession. Because more of the same usually just gives you more of the same. If you've got to involve your people to get to the level that we've talked about, you've got to involve everybody that's part of your organization, including your advisors, accounting, legal, etc. You've got to get them involved. Because you're going to be asking them to take part of the deal in lieu of fees, perhaps, or wait to get paid. I used to use Coopers and Lybrand and Melvin and Myers like banks. I paid them once or twice a year whether I needed to or not. I paid them when we did a deal. It can still be done. And should be done. Because trying harder and harder starts producing less and less. Now at this juncture, I want Burl to come up and talk about trying harder and harder, and less control is more control, and how you choked your business and now how it's bloomed, just for a couple of minutes. She's one of my superstars, and it's a lot easier to help train women, I'm telling you. Although I got some great superstars that are men, but now Burl has taken, I'm not putting words in her mouth, but literally I think, she has not tried to reinvent anything. If it says Lotus 1, 2, 3, she does it Lotus 1, 2, 3. And I mean, and if for those of you that can stomach it, you will have the greatest success if you follow the stuff verbatim. I will guarantee you success if you follow it verbatim. There is no chance that you will make, as Napoleon Hill used to say, it will come to you with such abundance you will be overwhelmed if you follow it verbatim. Every stinking step. No wishy-washy, or as my grandmother used to say, no witchy-watchy. Burl? Can we have a mic for Burl?
Some of the people here yesterday didn't hear what I had to say. I met Dan at a seminar. And it was luck. It was one of the luckiest days of my life. And we followed him around the country. I've seen him, I think this is my 7th time. He's came to Canada. I've seen him in the United States numerous times, and I've also been at his castle. When I first met him, the very first time I seen him, I couldn't relate at all. He didn't intimidate me, but I couldn't relate because we were a very small construction company doing $2.5 million, and I thought, what does this guy that has so much money and knows so much, how could we relate? And I really had a hard time. The second time it came, I read the book numerous times and just started to put into practice some of his principles. My profession is I'm a real estate broker, and I sold my business. I had a nice income coming in. So for 3 years I just kind of toddled around, didn't know what I was doing. My husband's a builder. I got involved in his business, and now I'm a land developer. And now I'm getting into doing a few other deals like Dan does, which is pretty exciting. When Dan met me, he teased the heck out of me, actually, is what he did, because he kept going like this. I was choking business. I had no idea what he meant. I had absolutely no idea what he meant.
Yeah, that was me. I was trying to
So,
monitor it.
and
That's okay. That's okay.
Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
okay, so he told me I was choking the business, I was too controlled, and I was a control freak, and it was good reason for it, because I had trusted a lot of people in my other businesses, and they had not done a good job, and I always found that because I'm perfect, I can do things myself better. So anyways, that's what I was doing, everything. And so what I did is I went home and we hired a CFO who's done a wonderful job for us. We just hired a general manager, which is doing an excellent job. I don't even go into the office anymore. I'm at my house. That's where I work now. I have my own little office there. So if you want me, you have to get me at the house. I started doing deals when I first met Dan, I wasn't a slouch. I was worth about $5 million, $6 million, something like that. So I was a little bit successful, and I was doing deals. I never made a lot of money. I made 10 here, 20 here, but the biggest one was 80, and I thought that was
80,000.
80,000, yeah. And when I met him, I had just stumbled upon this really good deal. And when he came to Ottawa, he sat down and he laughed about this, and I could have made $1 million on it, cash, like right then and there. And he said to me, is that what you want? And I said, yeah. It was really important to me. That was a lot of money to have $1 million cash. And he'll tell you I was writing $1 million and circling it and everything else. And he said, Burl, don't do it. And, and I almost didn't follow him. He's got lots of millions. I mean, I want one. Okay? So it didn't matter. And I remember he said to me one time, when we first started to work together, he said, Burl, he said, I'll help you. But he said, the first time you do something that I told you not to do, we're finished. So it was really hard because I thought, I want $1 million, but I really want to work with this guy. So what do I do? Anyways, I decided not to take it. And right now I'm negotiating, and it's as good as a done deal. I'm getting 1.8 cash right away, and I'm getting another 10 to 12 million over the next 3 or 4 years. So he made me basically. What can I say?
Just talk about a little bit about some of the other. You've heard a lot of other people. You've talked to. You've gone to all the seminars.
Yeah.
You've heard all the crap. I mean.
I have been to absolutely everybody. I mean, there isn't a seminar speaker out there that I have not been to. I mean, most of Ed's clients, I know them personally. I've had lunch with them. I mean, in fact, most of the time I was an investor bringing them into the city. It was just.
We have girls named real big.
Everywhere. And because I was always searching for something, and my background was a registered nurse. And I went to real estate and made a lot of money and did really well. Opened my own real estate company, and one of the big guys bought me out because I was really putting the squeeze onto them. And I didn't really have any business background at all, none at all. I didn't know what to do, and I was looking for something. I was looking for somebody that was where I wanted to be, and it could help me. All right, and it would help me. And there are very few people out there, and all the seminar speakers say, oh yes, they'll all help you. But when you call them, in fact, one guy called 11 times and he never even called me back. So, I mean, it just doesn't happen. And now I don't phone Dan very often, very rare, because I know he's very busy and I don't want to use up his valuable time. But I know that I could be in the middle of a negotiation, and if I needed him, I could walk out of there, telephone, and I know. And that's a comfort level for me. Okay, and whether I ever have to use it or not, I don't know. But it is a comfort level that's there, and that's really important. I learned more in 2 hours with Dan than I did with Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, the whole deal. I mean, there isn't anybody I haven't seen. And he's taken my net worth from $5 million to $20 million, and that's kind of, it's not where I want to be.
Since when?
Oh, since last May. Yeah. Where I want to be. I mean, I want a house so big when you walk into it, there's a sign that says, "You are here." So, I mean, I can't say enough. His stuff works. It's easy. It is very, very easy. And you just follow the book. That's all you got to do. Just follow the book, and it works. I mean, it works incredibly well. As I said, I have no business experience. I'm not a Harvard graduate, that's for sure. And it's certainly working very well for me. Oh, the manual.
The manual.
The manual, yeah. You need to go home and read it a couple times and really absorb it, and you'll get more out of it. Now, the other thing is, I've seen him 7 times and all over the world, and I mean, I follow around like a little puppy dog, and so does Casey, and so does Bruce, and we're all making a lot of money. And that's what you have to do. You can't just hear a person once. I don't go to any seminars. I would go free to another seminar. I mean, they could put me up, I don't care where, and I wouldn't go. I mean, unless Dan was there. That's my only criteria for going to a seminar, is that Dan's there.
Thanks a lot, Joe. I think it's important to note, you mentioned Bruce Whipple, who's another one of the guys who just lives and breathes Peñaisms. I came up with one idea for him, just one. I didn't think it was such a great idea until I found out what it did. He has a company called Audit Cost International, where he goes into Fortune 1,000 companies at that juncture and saves them money on taxes and utility bills and telephone bills, which isn't such a great concept. There's a lot of other people doing it in the country. And he had leveled out, I don't know, $3 or $4 million a year. And I told him, you know what you ought to do is throw away all your prospect cards. Now, you tell a sales marketing guy that, and it makes, I mean, it gives him colitis. Throw away your prospect cards. He said, he started twitching. He says, I don't think I can do that. I don't think my people can do that. I said, now he had done a little bit of business with IBM. And I told him that you are now going to be Big Blue, Little Big Blue, what they call IBM. And I said, you're going to go to around the Fortune 50 companies, and that's all you're going to do. From May of last year through December of last year, he added $35 million in revenue on the books. Then he landed Reader's Digest. Then he landed AT&T. Then he landed, I forget. But then he started to diversify. He just told me. He was diversifying a little, and he lost quite a bit of money, and he says, I'm coming back, because everybody does it. I mean, even smart ones. Me, I did it. And he says, Dan, he says, why don't you whack me in the head? I says, because you've learned from this, haven't you, Bruce? Have I? Why did I have to learn that way? Why did you just stop me? I said, no, you learned. He learned now. Well, he's back to just, because he went out into another part of the audit cost business he didn't understand as well. And I said, just do more of the same. Build more refineries. I mean, just do more of the same. And I think, I don't know if Ed gave you the example, you know, and on the lower end of the continuum, a karate guy who made $19,000 his first year after me made $85,000 or $89,000. Yeah, I mean, and it works. I mean, a guy that gives karate lessons. And I think he enjoyed telling the rich parents, your kid's a doofus. He's going to have 5 lessons a week because he's a doofus. He's uncoordinated, fat little moron. You know, he enjoyed that. He enjoyed that. Or sometimes he had to tell people, your kid has no talent. I can't take your money. How many have taken lessons from tennis, that kind of stuff? I'm here to tell you most of you don't have the talent to be above D players in anything you do. That's life. Yet they keep taking your money. They keep taking your money. I ascertain when I pay somebody, can I be an A-level or AA player? The answer is yes, I continue. And then I get second, third opinions too. If it's not, then I don't, you know, it's like kissing your sister. I mean, why do you want to do it? And but I mean, these people, and we have them from people that have done it from in the thousands of dollars to the millions of dollars and everywhere in between. This stuff works. It's not hard. We just wait until you start this stuff about telling people what you really think, and it eliminates a lot of crap in life. You're gonna have less people to talk to. I can assure you that. You're going to waste a lot of less. You're going to waste no time. I mean, you're going to get down to business. You're going to have the pedal to the metal. And I mean, it's just it's something that's hard to explain. Burl does it well. She experienced it, and to the extent that you need the replication. 90% of what I say here today, you will forget within 30 to 90 days. Unless it's replicated. There's only two ways of replicating it. Hear me again. I used to give free seminars. If you attend one, you can attend them all for a year, free. You know how few people, remember? You know how few people did it? Yeah, well, I mean, now we don't do that anymore, you know, because, you know, hear me a lot, interface with me, you know, listen to the tapes. I have... I don't know if I gave this example, but Bruce Whipple's son, whose highest game he had ever bowled was a 117. He's in a bowling league, a little kid bowling league. He listened to the tapes about my son and the 640 batting average, because it's in the tapes I have. And his kid went and bowled 167. Bruce called me up. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it was ready for him to break out, Dan. I said, yeah. 117 was the highest he ever bowled. What's his average? 78. I don't think it was time for him to break out, actually. I think that we may have had something to do with it. That's great, you know. But you have to have it replicated. Now, it's my life. So, I mean, I live it, breathe it, sleep it, everything I do. And for those of you that have been at my house, I talk just like this at my house in front of my kids, except I use four-letter words in front of my kids. And I've tried to clean it up, you know, because we're down here in the sensitivity center of the world. You know, there's special rays or some kind of meridians come together and cartify the sea, and that's where there's like a goofy people down here. And so I've tried to clean. And remember, I've never met a sensitive person that had any money. None. You know, I want to be proven wrong someday, but I haven't heretofore. I haven't anyway. But it's replication, replication, replication. You know. 17 times before it's absorbed. You have to listen to the tapes or hear me 17 times. And but I mean, it works. There's just no question about that. And if the other high performance people, you know, were out here teaching, they'd be teaching very similar. And we're not exactly the same because we're different personalities. But it's a lot better than trying harder and harder and producing less and less. Yeah. Let's take 5.
You mailed out 65